if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So that means if we don't define the improvement well, we are already planning for failure in our improvement initiative.
Hello and welcome to our last kind of recap call for the Lean by Nature exploration series. We're talking about continuous improvement guided by the natural flow. And today we're going to talk about making an overview of the Lean principles and what happens if we don't do all the steps that are necessary, as well as the natural cycle and what happens there, and kind of bringing that together. And yeah, so before we start, to kind of get yourself into a nature connected mood, I invite you to reflect on the question of what kind of animal or plant do you feel most drawn to, and what kind of experience did you have with that? And yeah, I would love to hear also from Aman, what is your experience with a certain animal or plant?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the check-in question. So one interesting observation, really, it is about a dog. And that has been a fascinating memory for me. I was once traveling alone uphill. There was a religious place, some temple sort of thing up the hill, and one had to climb several kilometers, I would say, to reach that place. And the place was pretty secluded, and there was nobody there. And after a while, a dog started accompanying me, and it was quite a relief for me that at least I had a living creature, with me, and I had a pack of biscuits with me in my pocket. So what I used to do is, after every few steps, I gave it a biscuit to eat, and it was very happy. And then it guided me through half the path, and then when I came back, and I talked to a few people, and they said that this dog was your guide. He was guarding you against other creatures who might look to harm you. So it was such a moment of gratitude that sometimes the animals, they really come and help you, and they're so sensitive. So I was really moved by that particular incident, and that has stayed with me. So that's something that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and for me, there are so many different animals and plants that I feel drawn to, and especially with the plants, it's the trees, all different kinds of trees. But somehow, what came up for me was the squirrel, and it's just I I love, I don't know, everything about those creatures. They're so fascinating. The first time I realized that the sounds that I was hearing were not birds, but actually squirrels communicating or fighting or playing, or yeah, all kinds of things. It's really weird to connect that to another animal that's not a bird. And um, there was one experience that I had with a squirrel that touched me deeply, which it's I once found a dead squirrel when I was yeah, taking a walk, and he was, I don't think he was old for that long, uh, died for that long, and I felt like I I don't want to just let him lay here. So I took him with me and connected somehow while observing that animal really closely, because usually they're so far away. And it was just such a fascinating thing to observe that animal so directly, to pet his fur and to see how the muscles are like everything is moving and stuff like that. And I was just so grateful for that experience. And whenever I see a squirrel anywhere, my mood lightens up, and I feel somehow welcomed. And yeah, it's um yeah, my sun in a way, that's lighting up my mood.
How wonderful.
Yeah. And yeah, since we uh, started with the question and kind of got into the mood, I suggest we get right into it. We don't need a recap today because the whole thing is sort of a recap. So Aman, I invite you to start with the lean principles and yeah, what we have to do, or what happens if we miss a step, or if it's somehow not working. So over to you, Aman.
Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Absolutely. I think the last few calls we had been talking about the lean principles of continuous improvement, and we had been talking about five step methodology or process that we must necessarily follow to make sure that the improvement is sustained. And that's what we talked about in the previous call. So if we want to just go back to these steps one by one and see uh, what happens if we don't uh, follow these steps or the natural flow of improvement. So the first step that we talked about was the define phase, where we really go ahead and define what the improvement is going to be. And and the only thing I can say that if we don't spend too much time in defining the improvement well, then we are actually going by the phrase. It's called, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail.
Mm.
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So that means if we don't define the improvement well, we are already planning for failure in our improvement initiative. So I think we must spend enough time in defining what the problem is, how much time we're going to spend, who are the people who are going to help us, the timelines, the resources available, and what can go wrong, the risk assessment. So all of that planning aspect that we had alluded upon earlier must be followed. Otherwise, we are just in for failure in that improvement initiative. So that's the first step, the define phase. If you miss that, the second one we talked about is the measure phase. And what we said was that once you define the problem, we should track data, because there is a saying that whatever starts getting tracked and monitored starts getting improved. And if we don't track, then there's a problem. And uh, and if we miss this measure phase, if we don't track data, we just go about conducting improvement, without any data or any reference point, then I would say that we are just kind of shooting in the dark. It's like shooting in the dark, because we don't really know that how much improvement has happened, what else do we need to do to improve, are we in the right direction, is the pace right or not. So once we have a reference point, then all of these things are easier to figure out. So I think that's what will happen if we don't follow the measure phase. We don't know really how well we are doing and what else we need to do. So that's the second phase. Then the third phase we mentioned is about the analyze phase. Once we have enough data, then we step back and analyze what improvements has to happen, what are the trends that are being seen, all of that aspect. And uh, on this step, I get reminded of a story, and that is the story of 5 blind men and an elephant. So what happened was that there was an elephant, and there were 5 men who were blindfolded, and they were left to figure out what is the shape of the elephant. So one person caught hold of the elephant's trunk, and he said, "Elephant is like a rope, a thick rope." Or the other person caught hold of his feet, and he said, "Okay, it is like a pillar." And somebody caught hold of his tail, and they said it is like a feather or something like that. Or somebody caught hold of his ear, and they said it is like a fan. But actually the elephant is not like any of these. So to my mind, if we don't follow the analyze phase properly, we just address one part of the problem. We just address the ear or the trunk or the the feet. We don't address the whole problem, and that's what happens if you don't analyze the situation well. You end up solving only one part of the problem, and the bigger part may still be there. So that's the pitfall of not following the analyze phase. Moving on, the fourth step of the improvement process was the improve phase, where we after analysis we continue sustaining momentum, we change old habits, we form new habits. And if we don't really work on the analysis phase, we don't improve the process, then I would say that it is like a false start. And it's like there's a saying that vision without action is mere daydreaming. So if we are not converting the analysis into actions and improving our process, then we are just daydreaming, and then it's not going to end up anywhere in terms of improvement effort. So that's going to be the missing link here. And the last aspect is about the control phase, where we say that once you have improved, then you need to sustain improvements by setting up some new processes and new ways of working. And if we don't do that, if we once we achieve the result, we just forget about it, then we are actually getting into a vicious circle of improvement. Then it is going to be going back and forth, because we really haven't taken the final step of sustaining by defining the new process or training the people, etc. And then we are going to end up slipping back to where we started in a way. So I think those are the pitfalls of not following the process improvement methodology, and each step has its own significance and must be followed in a sequence to attain sustained benefit. So that's what resonated in me, Elizabeth.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much for that great recap. It it is really fascinating how somehow it's very similar to the natural cycle, and at the same time, um, I see that um, it's yeah it lacks that yeah, okay, so it all makes sense, but to have that more physical connection somehow, at least that's how I or why I came up with the natural cycle things, because in in the natural cycle, which I'm just going to show the overview really quickly to get a good idea again. It's basically we observe, then we envision, connect, adapt, strengthen, share, integrate, and mentor. It's like the whole spiral that goes like a natural cycle of the day, of the month, of the year, and has the same kind of energies. And it's you can somehow connect it more with natural things that you can observe everywhere. So it's, to me, it's more holistic way of looking at it, and at the same time it basically has very similar steps. So the first one is the observe phase, which is basically you really have to, before you do anything, just sit down and listen and watch and take everything in that's there, and not just about the one thing that you want to improve, but the whole environment, how it all plays together, how one thing fits into another, how maybe even the things that you hadn't considered as part of your ecosystem might still influence you in some way. How different, for example, in an organization, how different teams or different companies might influence you, how the political system might influence you, how weather changes might influence the people that influence the team. It's like, it's a very complex thing that we really need to observe everything and watch how it all plays together. And in the next phase, in the envision phase, it's more of a very creating a clear picture of where you want to go. And so if you leave out the observing and the listening, you might miss something later on. You might not have all the information. You might stumble upon something that you hadn't considered. You might just be in your own loop again because you only considered those 3 or 4 aspects that you always do. And you don't really find new, more innovative ways of actually improving if you haven't observed before. And in the envisioning phase, it's defining a clear image, a clear picture of where you want to go, and that's important for not just if you do it individually, of course you're the only one, but if you're working in a team, it's like creating a vision both within each person, but to have a clear vision of the whole thing, that everybody knows, okay, those are the different aspects of it, and to be very clear on that so that everybody can really connect with it and go for it, which is basically the next step. Because if we haven't created a clear picture and a strong emotion of why we need that improvement, why it's so important, what how we're gonna feel later on, how it's gonna be, how it's gonna turn out, then it's really hard for people to connect to that new vision. It's hard for people to get the energy of, yeah, I want to do that, I'm really excited, uh, I'm jumping up and running right away. Which is, yeah, the connection phase is basically, yeah, getting prepared, seeing who's in and who is not, building kind of a relationship with that goal. Like first you have a picture and then you're kind of looking at, okay, what could be the steps to get there, what do we actually need, what kind of resources, what people, what might still be missing, and that's all. Like it's gonna be reduced, or there are gonna be some parts missing if you don't have the clear vision that you created before. And so it's all building up somehow. Every step you miss something if you don't do it. And so after you connect it, your team is here and ready and wants to start, then there's the action or the adapt phase where you actually like implement the improvement, where you do certain things, maybe try out different things, see what works, what doesn't, but not plan anything anymore, but really implement it and see how it's working and see what you might have missed along the way. Because even if you go through all the steps, there's always usually always something that you're missing, that you hadn't considered before, that maybe changed some parameters, and so you just need to do it and think out of the box, question what's normal, do all kinds of crazy different things, and see how the improvement best works. So I think it's pretty clear if you don't do that, you basically there's nothing, because if you talk about it like you said before, Aman, if you don't actually act and implement something, it never happened. It's basically useless, any other work that you did before. And also the other steps are really important, because first you're like, "Ah, okay, yeah, we changed it now and it's all good," but to actually sustain that change, there are a lot of other steps needed, and the next one is to strengthen. So it's really building the environment, seeing that all the people are cared for, that the resources are not depleted, but they're sustainable in the long term. Like you're not running on 120%, and yeah, now the improvement is working, but it's not going to work long term, because if you don't find some way that it's working at a lower energy level, or that people are not burning out, then the improvement is basically useless as well. And so it's really finding that, okay, how can all the people involved be their best selves, um, without going over a certain limit that they can't sustain that improvement. And yeah, if you don't do that, you're gonna either it's gonna be burned out really quickly, like a really strong fire, and then like with a lot of thin sticks, it's like and then it's all gone. Or if it's the other way, you're like, okay, we're doing it somehow, but there's not really energy in there, and there's kind of a lower level of improvement that it's basically just maybe a notch more than before, but it wasn't worth all the effort of the actual improvement. Yeah, and so for the next step, which is the share and teach step, it's really about, okay, we learned something, we can share it with different people of the group. How can we actually improve from that and share, and they're gonna then implement it and make some improvements there, and find some way to do it together and not do it alone. So if it's an improvement of your personal life, still you need to find other people who are going through the same process, who you can share it with, that are, I don't know, accountability buddies or something, where you can share your wins or your losses, and you're just not alone, which is really, really important to keep going, because to keep going alone is a lot harder. And if you're working in a team, it's all about, okay, now one person knows how to do it, maybe it's time to share it with another, so that you as a team are strengthened. so that if something happens to that one person, if they get sick, then there's another who can take over and stuff like that. So that's kind of a mixture of the strengthen and teach and share. And so that's really important, because if we don't do that, it's basically, if we're not completely present, if we're sick, if we're somehow depleted, we just can't continue that change. We can't focus on our additional energy on actually continuing the change. And if we're not there, yeah, it's basically not happening. And the next stage is the integrate phase, which is more of a, okay, now we share the knowledge and we're strengthening, but we still need to find a way that it doesn't take so much energy to have that new improvement. So we need to create an environment that's going to help us actually make it easier to make that change, because we're creatures of habit, and it's really hard to change something, even if we want to, even if we did it a few times. It's a lot easier if, for example, we're surrounding ourselves with people that are wanting the same things, like also wanting to improve our health or whatever, instead of only talking to people who couch potatoes and don't want to do anything. Then it's going to be really hard to sustain that change. And yeah, in nature, it's basically you're in that environment that's going to help you improve and be the best version of yourself, and you can't really change that. In nature, it just happens automatically that you have that environment. And with animals or plants, but we need to really actively see, okay, how can we adapt our environment in that way. And if we don't do that, it's just going to be really hard to keep going, and it's going to take a lot of energy. And the last stage of the cycle is the mentor stage, which is not really sharing with others, but making sure that others really understand and learn. So it's not about sharing knowledge, but it's about conveying experience and maybe even wisdom. So it's not so much about you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's about making sure that the people that are taking over from you actually learn to create that same mindset of improvement, to learn how to see in a certain way, to really get a feel of the system or the organization or the process. And yeah, that's a lot harder to do than just teaching. And it's so important to have that deeper understanding of certain things if you want to give it over to the next generation, of whatever. Like it can be just a new manager, it can be actually your kids, it can be anyone basically. And so yeah, the mentor stage, it's more of a really about more generations to come, how to bring that culture and that mindset forward. And if that doesn't happen, it's gonna die with you basically. So yeah, that's the overview of the natural cycle, and why all those steps are so important. So do you have anything to add to that, Aman?
Absolutely. A few points. Thank you, Elizabeth. I resonate completely. I think just from a layman perspective, if I look at the 8 steps, I'm totally with you that if we don't observe, then it's pretty much like, we are preparing for failure because we don't know the surroundings. We haven't really figured out what environment we are going to be operating in. So we are in for failure, that's for sure. The second one, you said envision, and there's one thing that resonates with me here is that if you don't know where you are going, then any road will lead you there.
Yeah.
So if you don't envision what you're going to do and what improvement is going to happen, then whatever direction you are taking, it will feel right. So that's a pitfall, and definitely we must envision the end um, objective of the improvement. And I'm just looking at a couple of other things. The connect, act, adopt. I think. If we don't connect, it's like the same thing. It's like false start. If we are not connecting well, we are not acting, then it's like dreaming with open eyes. It's like you're not converting your observation on envisioning into action. Then it's a mere dream in that case. And further, if we go along, if you don't strengthen, then we are left in the middle of nowhere. We are stuck in midway because you have reached an improvement to an extent, but then you're not investing in further strengthening it or building the environment. Then it is not going to sustain for too long, I guess. So we are, again, that is going to fizzle out. And the last 3 steps, if you don't share, you're right, we will be the lone crusader, and soon we'll be out of energy, and then we don't have like team members or participants who are having a shared vision as us. Then again, it's going to lose a lot of steam, and the improvement is not going to be sustainable. And in terms of if you're not integrating, I guess, if you're not further integrating, which is, I think you mentioned, it's an internal process, internal strengthening, then we'll fall short of vision, is what I feel. If we don't integrate, we will reach somewhere, but it will not be the goal, it will not be the objective, it will be some bit short of that because we are not really strengthening it further. And the last phase that you rightly said, the mentor, if we are not mentoring, then we are actually losing the opportunity of sharing all the wisdom, and it's going to die with us. And that's scary. That's scary. And many times I see people are stuck with the attitude of that if I share, then my importance will be lost. And it's a never ending game because then they're stuck in a vicious circle, and then they don't really impart their wisdom, if you will. So yeah, I mean, these are definitely resonating well, and if one can clearly see if these steps are missed out, then we are in for failure in terms of the improvement process.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that view as well from you. So yeah, now our next step, we talked about all kinds of all those steps over the last half year, and now we're going more inward. We're gonna retreat for probably about a month and um, develop a training or some kind of offering that we can actually help people in their improvement processes um, with that framework, and both on a personal level or even in a team or in a professional setting. Um, and yeah, so we're still in the middle of the planning phase or the envisioning and observing and envisioning and connecting phase. So for now, we can't really share much, but yeah, I'm excited. And I'm really looking forward to sharing a lot more about our offering, and helping people and helping you connect with and improve your um, whatever you want to improve in your life in a more natural flow, um, with a good framework that's going to support you and help you along the way. And yeah, Amanda, do you have any other little tidbits to share before we finish our call today?
Not really. I think it has been a great journey, as you said, almost 6 months, and I really thank all the participants who have been joining us off and on in these calls, and it has been a learning experience for us as well. And as Elizabeth, you mentioned, we'll be kind of compiling all the learnings and then putting it together and creating the offering that we're going to come back to you shortly with. So I think that's all I wanted to add.
Well, great. So that's all for today. And yeah, if you're interested to learn more, you can sign up for a newsletter and get email information about when there's more info happening or about the offering. There's a link to the email sign up, as well as the website and the YouTube channel in the comments. You can also watch all the other exploration videos on our YouTube channel, as well as on our website, www.leanbynature.org. And if you have any questions or thoughts or yeah, reflections, just send us an email at connect@leanbynature.org. We'd love to hear your insights on it, and to also improve that whole framework or idea in any way possible, in a very lean by nature way. So um, for now, thank you for watching, and hopefully see you next time.